When I initially started making this video, I had intended to call it something along the lines of Why Fairy Tale Sucks, or Why Fairy Tale is So Bad. But as I started to write the script and go through everything, I started to realize that there's actually a lot of good parts. So the bad parts are still going to be in there, but the good parts are too, especially near the end. So, without further ado, Fairy Tale. Sometimes bad, but yet also sometimes very good. So let's talk about it. My general rule for judging others for their tastes is that they can pretty much enjoy whatever they want, and I ultimately won't really care. Although I might question any recommendations you may make to me if you can't back them up. Where that changes is if they try to say it's good from an objective standpoint, or compare it to something else, and cite it as being better than whatever they're comparing it to. And hence, I will completely own up to the fact that Fairy Tale is, and will most likely continue to be, a pretty mediocre show. Granted, there are some positive aspects that largely go ignored that I will analyze, but I'll also be talking about what generally appeals to me about the show. On the critical end, there's a lot of things I'm sure you've heard about, so let's get into some topics about the show. Number 1! The fights. Fights in Fairy Tale always tend to resolve in a similar fashion. Natsu gets beaten up, looks like he's gonna lose, and then yells, "Friendship power!" and beats the enemy. This is obviously lazy, anticlimactic, and after occurring so often, becomes quite a boring thing to have to constantly observe. There's no real creative solutions to battles, there's next to no stakes because of how the audience knows that the protagonists are going to come out on top, and it makes the characters feel much more artificial. The fact that they can merely power ahead based on feelings alone is something incredibly unrealistic, and while it can be argued that that is exactly what the series is going for, it ultimately becomes tedious to have to sit through over and over and over again. No matter the enemy, it always seems like Natsu, Lucy, Urza, and the rest of the cast always have a secret trick up their sleeve, a special outfit designed specifically for the type of battle the audience didn't know about, or the power to simply want to win hard enough, or just to punch an enemy real hard and come out on top. Number 2. Character death. No one fucking dies in Fairy Tale. And it annoys the shit out of me. While the battles bring down the stakes quite a bit because they lack any possibility of the characters losing, stakes are brought down even further by the fact that no one ever dies. You have no idea how happy I was reading the Alvarez arc when Makarov bit the dust. I was so excited. I was so happy. Mashima finally found a little bit of conviction to keep someone dead after he has ass-pulled so many situations where someone appears to die and then doesn't. But nope. Can't even have that victory. He lives. I guess being created by Loxus just gives you enough Chad energy to return to the mortal plane. But there are exceptions. Fucking Igneal! Okay, listen. When you've got a history of happy fun times and you're expecting a happy father and son relationship to be not soon as pops, and then Igneal finally shows up, but then he gets ripped in fucking half, bitch! Good shit! Let's take another instance in the form of Ultir's death. Hero has a tendency of having the abilities of his characters to be practically limitless, but in this case, he did a cool thing and made it so that the use of Ultir's final ability would be super duper strong, but she would die from it. For the first time, Ultir truly sacrificed herself for others after living a life of constant selfishness and killing others, and the scene granted a nice sense of emotional catharsis because while she believed her sacrifice to be in vain, it saved the lives of so many others. By the end of the arc, I was very satisfied. The typical friendship power BS happened, we got a Natsu friendship power, but it ended off with a definitive death and the quasi-death of other characters. Yep. You know, Hero? I really gotta give it to you on this.
Oh, son of a bitch! She lives! She lives! Ah!
Now, I'll grant this. Some people permanently die in Fairy Tail. The issue, however, is who. Like this girl, this guy, this guy, this girl, this guy, and this guy. Here's the thing. None are main characters or who the audience had any amount of time to grow close with. Hell, most people aren't even going to be able to name or even recognize a majority of them. This takes away a dynamic that is important to nail in storytelling. Giving death weight. When you take away the weight of death by only killing obscure characters and giving the main ones extreme plot armor, you take away any sense of stakes that the audience may have towards any situation. As such, nearly every single arc that the characters go through feels hollow and lacking in consequences because of the pertinent ass pull and the lack of any major character death. Number 3. The villains are sometimes okay. Now, in the beginning, once again, super, ultra, ass. Salamander, stereotypical. Eisenwald guy, more typical. Leon. Leon actually served an interesting purpose, namely in the characterization of Gray. It opened up old wounds in him and as such allowed the audience to learn more about his past and sets up an interesting instance of parallelism between the two when it comes to an answer to their master's wishes. Phantom Lord Clown Wizard.
Yeah, but I wanna have power because I wanna be strong.
Oh. Yeah, and Gashio.
Yeah, but
Tower of Heaven. I freaking love Jalal, okay? A. Blue hair. Where can it go wrong? B. Incredibly interesting backstory giving us one of the few instances of a darker tone in the series, and much like Leon and Gray, sets up a parallelism between Urza and Jalal. This gives the story a tragic character. Someone died in their autonomy and cursed with the unshakable guilt of actions he's committed, but that he had no control over. A life set up for an endless path of pursuing salvation from seemingly irredeemable sins.
he kills someone, yes!
The Battle of Fairy Tail. Loxus.
Oh, look at me, poor baby. I want to be guildmaster because I'm strong, but my old dumb-running grandpa said no. Whatever, man. What are you, like 35 or something? Just give up and die, you cryptic geezer.
The, like, second generation Dragon Slayer thing was kind of okay. Horatio and Sace. Not super deep, but pretty okay. More connection to the Tower of Heaven gives a sense of cohesion within the story, while pursuing an immaterial wish through futile material means. This is echoed in their desire to bring back Jalal, whose epitome of this mindset begins each member of the Horatio and Sace's path towards their own personal salvation. Sub-Zero was dumb! Edalus. This one is also pretty solid. There's not objective evil within the kingdom of Edalus, as ultimately the crown is doing everything for the sake of its people, and is probably the best instance of the theme of friendship, as the guild members leave the alternate world with the idea that through cooperation, they can live in a world devoid of magic. The only issue, though, was the indoctrined mental state of the characters on the opposing side, as it lends itself to seeing them as objectively evil, which is unfortunate for the possibility of a truly morally gray villain the series could have presented. Tenro Island. Hades. While relatively one-dimensional in his motivations, it does expand upon the main theme of referring to Zareth. As opposed to Jalal's forced following, Hades has done so of his own accord. And yet, he too seeks a salvation within the Dark Wizard that begs the question of what exactly lies beneath the mystery of Zareth. The Grand Magic Games, Sting and Rogue, and Sabretooth. Sabretooth is pretty much the opposite of Fairy Tail, much like every other Dark Guild or villain they've encountered, so watching the interactions is pretty groan-inducing simply for repetition's sake alone. Sting and Rogue are also pretty one-dimensional and continue the typical holier-than-thou ideology because they're third-generation Dragon Slayers. Ooh. The Eclipse Arc. Future Rogue. Willing to kill and destroy simply because he lost his cat friend. Out of 10. Sun Village. Boring. And blank. Not even worth mentioning. Tartaros. The series finally gets a consistently dark tone. Oh, thank God. By Fairy Tail standards, the characters are fucking brutal. When Jackal stormed the Magic Council by himself and just fucking grabbed Lahar by the head and nuked his whole body? Dude.
shook.
Seeing the different demons of Tartaros is really interesting. Seeing how far they would go simply for the sake of resurrecting and killing Zareth, it continues to build him up as a character. Avatar. One-dimensional. Boring. Dumb. Grey being evil was pointless, except for the Groovia reunion. Alvarez. Well, here we are. The final arc. What could I possibly have to say about these final villains? Well, you gotta wait. Because, I gotta talk about other stuff, and this fits better in a different section. Number 4. The bad characters. This is gonna be a doozy. Loki has 2 episodes worth of development, and then stops forever. Elfman has 2 episodes of development, and then stops forever. Kana has 2 episodes of development, and then stops forever. Lizana has 2 episodes worth of development, and then stops forever. Are you noticing a trend here? Here's some more people that fall under that category. Mira Jane, Evergreen, Pixelo, Panther Lily, Mako, Guild Arts, Loxus, Mistian, Happy, Sting, Rogue, and Makarov. Also any aforementioned villains that are bad, obviously. I will, however, go in more depth with another person who goes on this list. Natsu. While I love this little dude, from an analytical standpoint, he's objectively terrible. He's got a thing similar to Goku going on, you know? He likes to eat a lot, he's thick-headed, dense, stubborn, has no interesting ways in which he grows stronger, and it never really comes at a significant cost, rather it's just the excuse of training. However, his search for his missing father is a compelling character arc to follow, and I rather like the twist of Igneo residing within Natsu himself, ultimately healing years of pain that Natsu had to endure. Had more been explored on the E&D aspect, I believe Natsu could have been higher elevated as a character. Oh, also, friendship power. And now number 5, semi-good characters. Number 1, Leon. For reasons mentioned before, as well as his own personal journey as he joins Lamia Scale and grows more into himself rather than relying entirely on the past master he had to define himself. Wendy. Typical, but still more fleshed out than a majority of the cast. Her journey from meekness to going fucking ham with her Dragon Force in the Tartaros arc was compelling to watch because of her character interactions and just her general personality. Even better, she doesn't act like a typical lolly character with Oni-chan syndrome, but goes to people like Natsu and Gajio for advice because of their shared experiences as Dragon Slayers, and eventually finds power within her own self. Lucy. Lucy never particularly undergoes significant amounts of character growth, save for the whole debacle with her father, but rather is subtly shown growth throughout the series. Her ultimate issue with herself is her desire to contribute more to conflicts, feeling powerless in most situations, which is especially well shown through the fact that she uses spirits, rather than her own personal power, to fight. But by the end of the series, Mashima uses the spirit outfits to symbolically show how Lucy has grown throughout the narrative and realized her own power. As you can tell, this is a repeated motif in Fairy Tail. Urza. While possessing an interesting background and steadfast mom role that she fulfills, she falls short in her fights and overall appeal due to the lack of significant flaws. The most annoying thing about Ursa is that she is always the strongest, even when Natsu or anyone else becomes incredibly powerful, and is second only to Natsu in Asshole, but by the end of the series, she's acting as some pretty tough competition. Punching a meteor is certainly no small feat for the average person, especially when your entire body is broken, but enough on that. In addition, while her magic is interesting, her ability to have a suit for every situation makes her just a little too versatile, and removes the need for her to find creative solutions to her problems. Acnologia. Lacking in significant character depth, but he makes up for it in his dynamics and setup. He becomes an underlying and archaic threat around midway through the story, and comes to fruition in the final arc, giving the viewers a sense of catharsis for when the team finally beats him. I will also point out this as being one of the reasons I like him, as he gave the guild one of the first instances of a loss. His antithetical nature when compared to the dragons that the audience is accustomed to is an interesting relationship to observe, and he represents a unique savagery among the villains that adds to his malicious and powerful presence. Number 5.5. Gotta mention this one real quick. Definitely one of the most positive aspects of the series is the character design. Everyone has immense presence and difference between them, and they are all incredibly aesthetically appealing. My main complaint in this department is repetitive female body types that Hiro uses, although there are some exceptions. On a personal note, I just really love his art style, man. I mean, if I could absorb, the artistic abilities of anyone, I would definitely choose Hiro's. Number 6. The good characters. Jalal Fernandez. Jalal is easily one of the most human characters in the series. His affliction and obsession with achieving atonement for his sins is an intriguing arc to observe, especially because of the extreme level that he takes it to. Even though the actions of the past that he enacted were against his will, his conscience can't rest from the traumatic experiences inflicted on him and that he inflicted on others. His relationship with Urza is one of the best in the series, namely because of how the two affect each other. Each are lost in their past or fall from their former glory, but who both pull up each other through an unspoken yet incredibly palpable love. This subtlety feels human, fluid, and natural, and gives Jalal the dynamic of being pulled out of his own mental hell by the support of the person that he loves. He is restricted in instances like the Grand Magic Games, and isn't always an incredibly overpowered character, and in fact is beaten extensively in the Alvarez arc. When he is, such as when he beats Tirachio and Seis, it's for the sake of showing how far each of the characters has come. While Jalal may still be living in his past, he is actively attempting to atone for his wrongdoings, and as such, has the moral high ground over these villains, and hence, this is displayed in physical prowess. Jalal is a wanderer, a seemingly lost soul riddled with guilt from a seemingly unforgivable past, but who little by little finds salvation in Urza. Zareth. Zareth is supported incredibly well through the immense amount of foreshadowing that is attributed towards him. Starting all the way back in the Tower of Heaven arc, he seems to be an untouchable and ancient power that instills an immense amount of presence within the audience because of how characters react to even the mention of his name. Not only that, but especially the incredible lengths characters would go to for the sake of serving him, or even just getting to find him. This makes his arrival in modern times shocking and powerful, and the audience is further throttled when Zareth easily destroys the people who attempted to revive him, citing that they are evil, and brings into question the morality of this enigmatic character. What is most intriguing about Zareth, however, is the complexity and uniqueness of his personality. A man with immense internal conflict, constantly battling with the oxymoronic and paradoxical thoughts swimming within his mind, tormented by the immortality that he has not been blessed, but cursed with. This is shown excellently through his various breaks in psychological stability, and the curse of death that surrounds him. He himself is a walking paradox of emotion, as the stronger he feels about someone, the more likely he is to kill them. This is mirrored in the removal or hatred of someone to cause the curse to recede altogether, and thus leaves an immoral man at the mercy of a curse that prevents any kind of interactions with others, lest he take the lives of anyone he cares about. All this in the name of attempting to bring back a lost life, an instance of naive hope met with possibly divine, possibly demonic answers that leave Zareth in a state of indefinite sorrow. The way that the immense number of years have taken such a toll, as well as the mixed morality whose sides are constantly warring with each other, gives the audience immense catharsis, and having an immensely foreshadowed villain have immense intrigue coupled with him. His final solution of taking the power of Mavis to go back and prevent the creation of himself is a compelling motivation, as it begs the question of whether or not it is worth it due to the different sides of the argument. His final fall at the hand of his brother is poetic, as Zareth first gained his immortal life through trying to resurrect Natsu. Zareth, ultimately, is a tragic figure full of complexity, intrigue, and an infinite amount of appeal to match the years of his immortal lifespan. Well, there you go. That is all the good character.
Great Bowbuster, bitch!
While Zareth is a tragic villain, Jalal is a tragic side character, Gray is the tragic main character. In my opinion, the most compelling. Gray is my absolute favorite character in the series, as I'm pretty sure is evident by the name of my channel. This comes from the complexity and darker tone of his character compared to his peers. Whereas Zareth is a villain and Jalal is a villain turned rogue, Gray is in the position of a protagonist or hero. The constant proclamation of friendship power and the overall optimistic attitude that the main cast holds is balanced mostly by Gray. Gray is burdened by his own past, and, much like Jalal, the guilt that comes with it. But while Jalal's is out of his own actions, Gray's guilt is found within inaction and his own rash decisions. This is leveled by his general cool and semi-laid-back attitude, and charm is added through his relations with other characters such as Natsu and Urza. Another personally appealing aspect to me is that he doesn't always wear the same clothes. While other characters don't always have the exact same outfit, they tend to be variants of their initial designs. However, Gray's wardrobe is quite extensive, and it gives a greater sense of relatability. It may seem like a minor detail, but to the audience this is a bit more of a bigger deal, seeing as how so many characters tend to wear the same thing over and over again. It also gives more significance to what he keeps consistent. namely the necklace that he always wears. In doing so, it gives the audience more sense of importance for the object and early on indicates it has a greater significance. What is intriguing about Gray is the pain that he constantly hides beneath that cool personality. Pun intended. Gray constantly lives with the guilt of the death of his master, and as such, he has devalued his own life. This is shown through the careless use of ice shell, which exchanges one's life in order to create a powerful prison. This is representative and gives physical form to Gray's emotional state, and it is a way to show his development as well. Gray is stubbornly sacrificial, with an extreme adaptation of the protect my family ideology that is so present. He paints a darker picture of this ideology, where Natsu is constantly pursuing the protection of his family without destruction towards himself. Gray injures himself in order to protect those that he cares about, and that is his fatal flaw. He is near suicidal with the willingness that he has, showing how little he actually values his own life. Once again, this provides interesting contradiction of the surrounding characters and gives more nuance to Gray. Gray is further characterized by the demon slayer magic that is gifted to him by his father. His tragedy and sadness was delivered to him by his father's death, and as such, in his father's second death, he is given a path of darkness. A dark road filled with hatred and a lust for revenge, and a catalyst for conflict between Gray and those he cares about. It creates an issue for Gray, having to choose between his own personal vengeance and his care for his comrades, as well as how much he values Natsu's life. In addition, while it gives him an excellent amount of power, it still comes with intense drawbacks. As with each use, he becomes more and more like the demons he is so obsessed with destroying. Another great part about Gray that once again defies the ordinary is his fights. They are so good. You see, where Natsu's solution is just to punch the guy harder with friendship power, Gray's fights are full of intellect, strategy, and interesting applications of his ability. I mean, seriously, some of these read like a JoJo fight. They're that well thought out. Interesting dynamics between Leon and Gray takes place as he finds interesting ways to counteract his rival's complementary powers. And against Juvia, he employs more of this general intellectual conflict. Against Racer of the Irration Seis, one of the best examples of Gray's prowess, and as such here his capacity to write fights is shown. Gray figures out the enemy's ability is a different power than what is initially revealed to the audience. Instead of making himself simply faster, Racer instead makes the perception of others to be faster, but still have them move at the same speed as normal, which Gray figures out by observing his surroundings. As such, he comes up with a solution of running out of the range of Racer's ability, and is able to observe him moving at normal speed. He then uses a bow in order to strike him down. Which brings me to another point. Why couldn't Hiro do things like this for fights with other characters? He clearly has the capacity to write well thought out fights that take advantage of each person's unique abilities, and yet so many fights are plagued with typical solutions. Against Sugar Boy, Gray keeps up his bluff in order to copy down the intricacies of the key and attempts to extend the fight as long as possible until he can play his trump card. And after analyzing the abilities of his opponent, he eventually finds that opportunity and acts upon it. Not only does this have him win the physical, but also the mental battle, and it is once again done in a smart rather than brutish way. For Gray fighting Ultir, it involves self-sacrifice, using his own blood in order to be able to defeat her, and it gives weight to the abilities he is using by giving them a consequence. Gray once again shows his intellectual prowess in the fight against Rufus during the Grand Magic Games, in which he is pushed to the limit by his opponent's seemingly overwhelmingly more powerful counterpart ability. This is an interesting circumstance to place a character in as it is, and even more so within Fairy Tail. Gray takes Rufus's greatest strength and transforms it into a weakness. He is aware that Rufus is constantly taking in and replicating information, and as such he comes up with the idea to overload his copying ability, and hence mentally weaken him, that then gives Gray the victory. This attention to detail is continued in the short Sun Village arc, as he recognizes the way the ice damages his foes. As opposed to the former attempt to break through the ice, he channels it into his own ice make ability and defeats his opponent. A similar instance takes place in the fight against his father, as well as the general smarts involved in utilizing things like cannons beneath the ice in order to gain the upper hand. Before we talk about his final fight, let's talk about another incredibly important character when it comes to Gray, Juvia. While she is unfortunately not a very fleshed out character herself, her dynamic with Gray is one of the most important in the series. While it can be treated as comedy, her over-the-top nature of love proclamation and expression is exactly what Gray needs. A man so enamored with his life having no value needs a consistent reassurance that it does indeed have value to certain people. The willingness to reopen his heart is shown through his emotional reactions to Juvia, the subtle moments of support and openness that he shows. This comes to full fruition in the fight against Invel, and that Gray sacrifices himself entirely for the sake of Juvia. This is both shocking as an antithesis to fairy tales themes because of how blunt and serious it is, and yet cathartic for Gray as a character. A heart once closed to the commitments of emotions has opened up to someone, and it is presented in an immensely impactful form. At the end of the story, we see Gray come to grow in himself emotionally, understanding the flaws of his past outlook and taking solace in someone who had finally given him as much love as he deserved. There are lots of flaws in Fairy Tail, but as you can see, looking at it through an analytical lens, there is still substance to be found. I feel that if they were to adjust the art style to be a little less saturated and less soft, cut the extensive use of comedy during serious moments, and change the combat mechanics, there would be much more value in the series. But ultimately, it is what it is, and subjectively, I just can't help but enjoy it. I find the characters endearing, the world of magic interesting, and overall just love watching these people doing anything. The combination of this and the immense nostalgia the series has for me just makes it fun to watch. From an analytical end, I very obviously see that there's a myriad of issues, but ultimately, there's a much more realistic middle ground for the series. Hey everyone, thanks for making it to the end of a semi-long video. I very much appreciate it, and you listening to my opinions on things. I know I have approximately 4 subscribers now, which, thank you very much for that, and overall, just not a lot of content to show yet, but I promise that there is much more to come. And I do hope that you consider subscribing and liking this video in order to get me a bit more boosted up, and so that I can continue sharing content with you, and with anyone else who would like to enjoy. Thank you.